Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the SOM TV podcast. My name is Jason Wise. On today's episode, we are going to talk about going back to wine country. I have Jess Lander, who is a very, very, very talented wine writer. She's written for most of the major publications in food and wine, and she's based up in Napa. She has a cookbook coming out that benefits employees of restaurants and the restaurants themselves throughout everything they've done with COVID that involves the great restaurants up in Napa Valley. Her and I are going to discuss how and where do you go back to wine country. But before that, today's podcast is sponsored by Eldon Selections. Eldon Selections has created the first ever Burgundy-only wine club. If you watch SOM TV, you saw their wines incorporated into our A Year in Burgundy live watch with Shakira Jones and Jill Zamorsky, MS. And the wines were fantastic. This is one of the great companies. They go and they search out these very small, some of the last hidden gems in Burgundy. And they do a club shipment, all sorts of different methods. They do red and whites. There's food notes and tasting notes and all sorts of stuff. You want to go to burgundywine.com. If you're anything like me, you are looking for a Burgundy wine that is affordable and actually worth the money. And this is one of the very few places I can throw my weight behind because it is both. burgundywine.com. Shipping's included. They have all sorts of different things. Go there, check them out. They're great. Without further ado, my conversation with the lovely Jess Lander. Jess, it is a pleasure to have you on this podcast. I think I want to start by introducing people who you are. You quickly became a fixture in Napa. Jess, how would you describe, you're a wine writer, food writer. How would you describe what you do up there?
Well, most of my friends and family will say I just eat and drink all day and don't work or do anything like that. And they're not completely wrong. But yeah, I get to do a lot of wine tasting and visiting local restaurants and hotels and even beyond Napa. And then I get to write about them. So it's definitely a dream gig, I would say. Yeah,
it's pretty good. It is. I will say, though, anybody who works, look, there are some things I can, sympathize with you in an odd way. Is that it is hard work, though. We always, my crew and I, we call it being tortured by amazing things. Dinners are long, deadlines are tight, but at the same time, you're doing incredible stuff. So it's hard to be I'm really tired. When you tell somebody that, they go, oh, I'm sorry.
I actually have these conversations a lot because your friends don't want to hear that you ate too much food at a Michelin star restaurant or had too much vintage wine. They have no patience for that whatsoever. But I've been able to bring my husband along on a few of these things, and he can tell you that he's had to tap out. So it's, you have to have a lot of stamina to do this job.
Yeah, I will say to anyone listening, you don't understand how hard we have it. It's very hard. No.
Feel bad for us.
So Jess, yeah, too bad for us. So Jess is, I will say this because I think you'll be more modest. Jess is an incredible writer who writes for Wine Enthusiast. She has written for Decanter, all the great publications that talk about wine and food. And we have a lot to get to. The main thing I want to make people know is you have a new cookbook that has come out that has been a deep labor of love for you.
Yes.
And all of the profits go to help out-of-work restaurant workers. Is this correct?
Yes. 75% go to Napa's restaurant community, the workers, and then a small percentage goes to another charity in Napa, Feed Napa Now, which feeds the local community in need.
What's the cookbook called? We're going to get into it.
Yeah. It's called the Essential Napa Valley Cookbook. And we're playing on that essential word, obviously, because of the pandemic and what we've all been through in the last year.
All right. So here's where I want to start. Obviously, I live in Los Angeles, so there's quite a bit of Napa's a close place. But I think in the greater wine world, Napa it's an important place. I mean, I was talking to a wine collector just about, 3 or 4 days ago, and they said from a value standpoint, Napa wine is worth more and more every year, more than any other region, which is kind of mind-boggling. Do you think Napa has its own personality? So when you say the Essential Napa Cookbook, does it have a culinary thing where you can identify it for the region?
Kind of. I mean, I think you have to just tie it to wine. Wine came to Napa before food. The culinary industry here came out of necessity of this being a wine region, and you need to drink wine with food, especially the wines we're, making here. So a lot of the restaurants are building their menus around these amazing wine lists and the wineries that we have here. I think definitely, you can identify Napa as a more of a fine dining, place. There's obviously just some incredible high-end restaurants and tasting menus and just really great chefs here. But part of the thing I want to do with this book is showcase that the other side, there are these cafes and, takeout places or just smaller independent restaurants that aren't going absurdly fancy and, expensive, but they're still making really incredible food. And there's just this bar in Napa where I think it's hard to find bad food here.
Yeah. Well, it's both great that you did this cookbook, but also unfortunate that you had to. So we have a film when the pandemic started. We scrambled to figure out how do we document it. And at the very beginning, there was absolutely people didn't understand how dangerous this is. People didn't understand how to continue. And, filming is pretty personal and it's tough. And so we started filming a guy named Bobby Stuckey in Boulder. And through this process, I can tell you, I have seen now this is just through one person in restaurants' eyes, but he's working to save restaurants. I can see how devastating and tough this entire process has been. And then I start thinking about ones who don't have the means, like, Bobby is well known. Frasca is an important restaurant. But I think what you're doing is highlighting the restaurants that really, really, really maybe didn't have that kind of national recognition. It's easy for us to do that. And, he's working with top chefs and major news outlets. What kind of restaurants are in your cookbook? And tell me, what has happened to Napa? Let's take Napa as a petri dish for what happened during COVID and why you had to do this.
Yeah. So I'll answer your first question just on what kind of restaurants are in there. We do have, some of those restaurants that definitely probably don't need the help as much as others. I wanted it to be the Essential Napa Cookbook, which meant we needed to have some of those essential restaurants, like, Cindy Paulson's Mustards, like I had to have her in there. I'm sure she's doing well, but Cindy's also been through a lot with the fire personally for herself. So we have a lot of those Napa staples that some of those fine dining places that, if you've been to Napa, you've probably eaten there. And then I tried to kind of go with some of those smaller local favorites, just the ones that maybe you only know about if you're in the know kind of thing. And just highlighting just some really good people and our restaurants that have been around for like 20, 30 years in this valley, which is really hard to do, I think. And then, so Napa as a petri dish, like anyone, they were really affected by the pandemic. We shut down, I think, fully twice in the last year for, much longer period than anyone thought to begin with. And then we had, reopening, and then we had to cut back down to smaller capacities. And it's just been this like yo-yo of opening and closing and furloughing. And, I think a lot of regions have been going through that, obviously. But I think Napa has just really had a hard time. Like they just can't catch a break. We've had the earthquake and then fires in 2017. And then last year there were the fires, but even before that, there was smoke events that closed the restaurants down. And then obviously during the pandemic, we had devastating fires that just added to everything. Tourism's already pretty stopped because of the pandemic, but a lot of those Bay Area tourists, California tourists we must get, weren't coming up here because we had smoke in the air for weeks. And so it's just been I think a tougher year than even most regions we're dealing with for Napa.
I want to talk about people kind of starting to ease back into coming to Napa and what that looks like. But before I do, first of all, the cookbook is excellent. People who are listening to this, it should be on your shelf. The fact that it's a charity is even more reason. Where can they get it? Where can people order this book?
So it's currently available on pre-sale at napavalleycookbook.com. So hopefully pretty easy to remember. And then the books are at the printer right now, so they should be ready to be shipped in June.
It's so ambitious. I applaud you for doing this during a time that it seems like people have a lot of free time, but no one does. I mean, it's been crazier, I think, for everybody than it was previous. So I applaud you.
Thank you. I mean, we pulled it together in about 4 months' time, which is pretty crazy to put together a cookbook. It was definitely an additional full-time job and then some, but we just had a lot of really awesome volunteers wanting to get it done. And we wanted to get this out while people were, still caring about the pandemic. I think our attention spans are going to easily shift as we reopen. And I wanted people to still care about that cause. And then also the sooner we got it out, the sooner we can get, funds to these workers who need it. And even if they're back at work now, they lost months of income or, they weren't making as much in tips while there is limited capacity. So I'm sure they all have bills that they are going to be trying to pay off for quite a while, even as we fully reopen.
Absolutely. So napavalleycookbook.com to pre-order.
Correct. Yep.
Fantastic. What are some of your favorite recipes in there? Because I mean, this is obviously, the charity aspect of this is a reason to get it, but also it's a beautiful book. And if you like Napa and you like the region and you like the wines, there's a wine component as well. You should have this on your shelf. What are your favorite recipes in there?
Yeah. So to your point, when I was thinking about doing this, I was just kind of like, Napa is a one of the biggest culinary meccas in the US, despite its size. And so I felt like people would want this book regardless of the charity option. So I hope that that is enough of a selling point. Yes, we have 36 recipes from 33 restaurants, I believe. And I was able to get some of my favorites in there, like Goose and Gander's G&G burger, Bistro Don Giovanni's salmon. We've got the lobster corn dogs from Charlie Palmer's Steak.
Lobster corn dogs. That's great.
Yeah, there's a really great variety. And there's definitely some iconic dishes like Mustard's Mighty Meatloaf that people will recognize and have had at the restaurant and will love to make at home. And then we've just got some other just unique things that you might not expect. We've got some desserts. We've even got 3 cocktails on there because, you know, sometimes when you're tasting all day in Napa, you want to just have a really nice cocktail at dinner. And we've got some really good restaurants doing the cocktail game. So fried chicken from Boonfly, that's another one that a lot of people might know. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of variety.
Yeah. I think so. I'm up in Napa. I don't know. My team's up there often, at least once a month, filming and doing things. There's a restaurant that closed down that is still a heartbreaker for me. Is Mimi Nashi. It was a place I used to go over and over and over again. And I think anyone listening to this, I'm sure you have a story in your town or place where you live where there's just that one place that you thought was always going to be there. And now it's gone. And that was like my go-to spot every single time. This incredible Japanese soul food place. It was just amazing and very affordable. Yeah,
that one was heartbreaking for me too. And to be honest, that closing happened right around the time of me coming with this idea and deciding to do it. And I didn't want to see more Mimi Nashi's close because they were a very stand-up restaurant here that was very beloved. And if one of those guys can go down, you know, then a lot of these other guys, like maybe they don't stand a chance. So that was really concerning. Another one was ABC Bakery, which was downtown. And, you know, personally for me, when I first moved to downtown Napa, I could walk there and I went there all the time. You know, I hadn't gotten there as much lately when I was living up Valley, but, you know, that one was really hard to see go as well. And I felt like buying, you know, me getting takeout multiple times a week wasn't going to save any of these restaurants. So I wanted to try to do something bigger and make a bigger impact.
Yeah, it's a very tough, this whole thing. And I don't think we're done seeing the waves of kind of how this is going to keep moving. And I think people listening always have a question of why Napa? Well, the interesting thing about Napa is it is a very concentrated place. You know, meaning, like you said, you have all this fine dining, you have very small places, you have places that have been there for a long time. It goes this way for wineries too. But you also have a tremendous amount of money up there in different ways. You have new money, you've got old money, you've got money for people who just want to make a winery for hobbies. And that stuff is good, but it's the constant, like the restaurants and the wineries that have been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years that are actually going to make Napa become whatever it's destined to be. I mean, it obviously is not going away, and I hope we get the fires in check. But
wine and food is like what Napa is. Of course, there's, you know, hotels and spas and other things, but, you know, if we don't have both of those things, you know, producing high quality and bringing tourists in, like, you know, this valley, I don't know what it would be. So
it would be what it was before then. It'd be apples and figs and plums and prunes. And I mean, it would just be farming.
Yeah. And who wants that? So yeah, it is concerning. And, you know, I look at the wineries and the restaurants and they both have really struggled, obviously, in the not just last year, but the years before because of all the disasters. But I think the restaurants are probably in more danger of closing. You know, I don't want to make assumptions, but I think a lot of the wineries have a lot more money, you know, to keep going longer than restaurants. And they also had more opportunities to pivot and sell and make money during the pandemic. Whereas restaurants, you know, they're pretty limited to just takeout. They can't sell their dishes to people all over the world the way, you know, the wineries were able to do that. So I just felt like they really, you know, needed it the most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's talk about people. What is going to happen? Are people coming back to Napa? What I want to talk about is going back to wine country. And I was just up there and I agree. The traffic is not fun anymore. What is your prediction for the future here? And I don't mean like fiscally. I just mean, are people coming back? What's it going to be like when everyone's back to normal? How different will it be?
Yeah, people are back. Like the last month, I would say I've noticed a huge difference just in the amount of people on the roads. Like you said, the traffic's back. That shouldn't deter anyone. That's just kind of part of it. But
well, you basically have two roads going in and out. I mean, so
yeah,
it's going to be what it is.
For anyone who knows this specifically, it took me 10 minutes the other day to get from St. Helena High School to Sunshine Market, which is like, I don't know, a quarter of a mile, maybe a half mile. So, there are those things, and it's hard because we've had a year without it and it's been really nice to just kind of breeze through the valley. But ultimately, you have to be glad to see it because that's what our valley thrives in and that's what the businesses need. So people are back, we're pretty open here. Obviously, everyone's still taking precautions and being safe. What's cool about being an ag community is people got vaccinated very quickly and early here. And, they did a really great job getting the winery workers and the restaurant workers and all of hospitality people vaccinated. I've been fully vaccinated for a while. All my friends are. So I think people are feeling pretty good and we're definitely seeing the tourists come back. So I think that's just going to continue. I just pray that we don't have more fires that cause another halt in that. I think, harvest season is such a big time of year for us. It's always been our most popular season for visitors. But if the fires keep continuing, that might change. I don't know if people are going to still want to come out here in September, October, which is a shame.
Yeah, oh boy. How are things going to be different for people who go to Napa to taste wine, go to Napa to visit? Is anything going to be different in the next year? I mean, more outdoor stuff?
I think in general, it's going to feel pretty normal. I think everyone's just very anxious to get back to normal, but I am seeing it's a little slow for some wineries to, start up some of the experiences they were offering. So there's definitely like a little bit of a limited experience. I think before the pandemic, there was still a lot of wineries you could just kind of walk into. And I think we're pretty much in a reservation only era at this point, which will continue. There might be a few here or there, but I definitely recommend doing your research and making reservations. I'm actually hearing from some friends that their wineries are booking up weeks in advance on tasting. So it's definitely something that you're going to want to really plan out if you want to go the places you want to go. What's cool is a lot of the wineries started outdoor experiences that they weren't previously offering. And I think a lot of them will continue to do so because, we really do have the perfect weather for that and the perfect views. And I think there's also just a focus on longer experiences where you can sit and enjoy and you're not going to 3-4 wineries a day. 2 is my sweet spot personally. I think by that 3rd, you're not even tasting the wine anymore. It's time to go back to the hotel and sit by the pool. So there's a lot of like really awesome wine and food experiences where you can spend 2-3 hours at a winery and just really soak it all in and enjoy it.
That's great. I always hear like, wineries are like, we're more Burgundian or we're more Bordeaux-like. And so the funny thing is if you go to those regions, you have to have a reservation for everything and everything closes at like 7 p.m. If you needed water, you would die on the streets of France looking for a bottle of water. Now Napa, I feel like, is like that. So when they say like, we're like Bordeaux, you are, because everything needs a reservation and everything still closes early because of the pandemic. I was just up there and I'm like, nothing's open past 8 p.m. It's like, does anyone eat dinner past 8 p.m.?
We're already a sleepier town to begin with. Don't come to Napa for the nightlife. There's a few places, we still got like 2 dive bars in town if you really want to do that. I was just in Hawaii and it was the same. I had to make reservations everywhere I went. And, I was trying to get reservations weeks in advance and it was booked up. So that would just be the biggest thing is expect people to be there. Don't expect it to take a while to bounce back because we are bounced back. I had a friend in town in April and I wanted to take her to my favorite restaurant. And about a week in advance, the only reservation I could get was like a 2:30 on a Thursday. So we had a little early bird special.
Very few people cover Sonoma and Napa as much and as frequently and as deeply as you do. You got to have some secret little places where if people want to go visit, and let's say they didn't plan it out 12 weeks in advance and they want to go next week, are there any little places where you're like, you should try? Are there any little wineries that people should visit? I mean,
oh my God.
Any little tipster stuff? Come on,
I know, but you're kind of putting me on the spot.
Well, that's the whole point.
Many. I know. It's so funny because everyone's always like, well, what's your favorite winery? And, where should I go? And it's like, okay, well, what kind of wine do you like? And what kind of experience are you looking for? And all that stuff. So it is difficult. What I would recommend is look for, if you are willing to get a little off the beaten path, as they say, the wineries that are on the mountains, on Spring Mountain, on Howell Mountain, those are, in my opinion, like the true gems that have, they aren't getting a ton of traffic. They're usually doing like 1, maybe 3 appointments at a time. If that, they've got incredible views and really good mountain wines that are just, exactly what Napa's about. So I would just kind of look on some of those mountains, and you're going to have to drive a little bit, but it's worth it for the like really personalized high-end experience, I would say.
Oh, no question. Like which wineries you mean? Like Spring Mountain Vineyards or like
like Barnett,
Fantasca or
Fantasca
Barnett,
owners are friends of mine. So yeah, go to Fantasca. There's just
that's Dylan Proctor, a SOM alumni, is the reps that
Dylan's
wine.
there.
Yeah.
So it's and Howell Mountain too has just so many great wineries and a lot of like really small families that are running these places. We have some friends. I'll give them a little shout out. Red Thread Wines. They're a couple. The husband winemaker, his family owns Summit Lake Vineyards, which has been up there since it's their 50th anniversary, I think, is this year. So they were up there when not a lot of people were. And they're just very authentic, genuine. You taste at their house for Summit Lake. And then my friends that have their own brand now, it's the same thing. It's just an experience that's hard to get in Napa, where if you don't need it to be fancy and over the top, those are the kind of places I like to go and just talk to people, and you're going to be their best friends by the time you leave. So
I think, honest to God, I mean, look, a lot of the bigger wineries, Opus One and Chapelet and all these incredible places are wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those ones you're describing right now are, for me, that's the soul. I mean, Napa started that way, and the ones that can still exist. The one problem is I keep making films and putting them on content, and then they become harder to get into. Yeah, but at the same time, it's great because they're always great people and I want to see it.
Yeah, and you're not going to get everyone because people have to go off. Like I said, they have to maybe drive half an hour on some windy roads to do it. You have to kind of be dedicated. And I think, you come to Napa the first or second time, you hit all the classic spots or the must visits. And then if you've been a few times, start getting out of that box and going off into the hills, and you'll end up loving the people you meet out there a little more. And you're just going to be more connected to that winery and that brand because they're going to take the time to really sit down. A lot of those times you're actually tasting with the winemaker or the owner still, which is very rare at even the family owned wineries on the valley floor. Like you're not getting that anymore. It's just not happening.
No.
So
yeah, they're often traveling or too busy or whatever else.
Yeah.
We have the same, my crew and I always say, if you've been looking at your phone in the backseat of a car on the way to a winery, if you're not sick when you get to the winery, car sick, you haven't traveled the right roads.
It's very true. I have to put mine down because I get sick when I'm on my phone driving those roads. But they're beautiful too. I mean, they're just, you don't want to be on your phone because they're so scenic. And, those are the roads that you're going to find a lot of cyclists, which drives me crazy because, you have to go so slow around these turns. You don't want to hit another car coming on. And I could go on a whole rant on cyclists, but they're cycling on those roads for a reason because they're just, gorgeous and scenic, and you're not going to get the traffic and the people up there that you would elsewhere.
So if anybody wants a profile on Jess, she spends her time in Michelin-starred restaurants and hates cyclists. That's her bio right now.
That's not inaccurate. Sorry, cyclists. For me, cycling up a mountain does not look like fun. That's just me personally.
Love it. One other thing about Napa, which I don't often ask people, and I don't think a lot of people realize how different the little AVAs are there.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Howell Mountain, you mentioned Spring Mountain, all these places. What are your favorite areas and what makes them different from the others? Where do you like to go in Napa? Because I really want to see Napa come back, and I know it will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny because everyone talks about the microclimates and, how the different temperatures and, breezes and things like that make the wines different in every AVA. And that is true. However, in terms of just experience and maybe doing something a little different, I love sending people to Carneros, which is just rolling green hills. You're not just going to get vineyards, you're going to get cows and farms and just really like kind of old Napa in a way. And Carneros, is on the splits between Napa and Sonoma. So you can taste on both sides, but you're not going to get as much Bordeaux over there. You're going to get some Pinot Noir, some Chardonnay. I really like going to Bouchain and, Artesa. Cuvée-Sans got one of the best views, I think, out there. And it's just slower pace. It's quiet. You get this amazing afternoon breeze that feels really good on a hot day. So I love going out there. And then Coombsville is kind of my little secret spot right now that I'm loving. It's kind of been up and coming for a while, but it is truly the last pocket of Napa that's not quite as overdeveloped. There's actually a lot of people that live out there. My husband grew up out there. And when he grew up out there was no vineyards hardly at all. But it's got these nice winding roads and wineries here or there. There's a lot of space and some really good wines being made out there. Plus, they've got a little more of a cool climate factor. So the Cabernets are a little different. They're still big, but they're not as extracted. There's like this nice mineral quality to it. So I would say both of those are in South Napa, and I would encourage people to explore.
Yeah, Coombsville is a great call. You can still get, I mean, some of the wines you can get out of that area are so affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just the same old thing in other lesser known areas. It's just people don't know about them. So that's a great trick.
Yeah. And a tribute, like case in point for Coombsville is you've got some real rock star winemakers making wine out of that AVA. So I hope it stays a little chill like it is, but I think it's going to be a star, especially as our palates evolve a little bit. And I think some people are, going a little bit away from some of those over concentrated jammy cabs and a little bit of that cooler, it's not cool, but like cooler climate, Cabernet and Bordeaux style wines could be something that people start really gravitating towards more. It's my prediction.
Yeah, well, I know, obviously, I completely agree. Especially, I think if you're somebody, look, if you have wine only at dinner or you're having it at Christmas or whatever, I mean, some of those big wines are delicious. I love them. But when you're drinking wine often, all the time, and you're tasting wine all the time, I mean, for me, I check alcohol levels all the time. I want to see it lower. I just do. Yeah. And it's not just for the fact that I have to have more than the average person in a day. Mm-hmm. I have to. It's, it's torture. But it's because, it's just because I feel like now, I think it's a lot easier. And I know some winemaker friends who will come and snap at me for this, but I think it's a lot easier to make wines that are, not 13.5% alcohol. It's tough. You have to really be on your picking.
In Napa, yeah.
Yeah, in Napa especially, but almost anywhere now.
Yeah, the climate is making it so that it's really hard to get those lower levels. And, I actually wrote an article on this last year because I think people are seeking out cooler sites for the future, right? We don't need to get into the climate change because that's like a whole nother podcast that I'm sure you've done a million times. But you've got winemakers seeking out these cooler spots because in 10 years, they're still going to maybe be in a better spot for not making, 15% wines.
Yeah, that's true. I do find a lot of winemakers though that will argue that. They will say, it's like 70-30, 30 climate, 70 winemaker. It's really a mentality thing. I mean, Steve Mathiasen gets in this with me all the time. When some winemakers will say, look, it's because of X or Y, or it was a really hot year. And Steve's like, well, my grapes are from, 74 feet from there. How come my wine is 13.2%?
Yeah.
I say because you're insane, but
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of debate out and, we don't actually know what's going to happen in 10, 20 years. I think we all definitely need to be thinking about it, but who knows?
Well, I look forward to Alaskan wine being the next big thing.
Yeah. Ice wine. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring it back to your cookbook. So one more time for everybody, where they can get it. Where is that website again?
So it's napavalleycookbook.com. Also, each recipe has a wine pairing selected by a master somm here. So, you can get a little geeky on that and even order some of those wines and support the wineries as well to pair the dishes.
That's great. Jess, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope people seek out your articles, find you on social media and everything. Yeah. You are one of the good ones.
Thanks. Instagram, it's at willwrite4wine with a number 4. So post a lot of delicious pictures of food from Napa and Sonoma and views.
If anybody wants to chronicle how tough Jess's life is, this is where you see it.
You're really going to get an idea of how rough it is to do this work. So
yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, kid. I appreciate it very much. And I look forward to clinking a glass with you at some point up in Napa.
Yes, definitely. Let me know when you're in town again.
Well, I'll be up there soon. Okay. Talk soon.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Don't forget, this podcast was sponsored by BurgundyWine.com. Eldon's Selections are finding great Burgundy wines. Go to their website, check them out, get a great discount. Also, don't forget, our Verticals film about Lafitte Rothschild and the Rothschild family is coming June 18th to Som TV. SomTV.com is $49.99 for a year. It's worth it. All right, everybody, please be safe. Talk soon.